Today marks 1 year since the massacre at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. 14 students and 3 adult staff members were killed after a gunman opened fire in a shooting rampage. CBS News correspondent Adriana Diaz is outside the school with more on how the community is mourning the lives lost and fighting for change.
The community of Parkland is remembering all the lives lost 1 year ago at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. A sign at the school is encouraging students to be positive, passionate, and proud. Some spent the morning with first responders and visiting with service dogs. Linda Beagle-Shulman lost her 35-year-old son, who was a teacher at the school.
I walked down the path today, and it was just like reliving last year when we walked down the path.
The school has beefed up security, adding more than 100 new cameras and doubling its security staff to 18. But students like senior Alea Eastman are demanding more.
Our lives depend on you. Our lives are in your hands.
She told her story on Capitol Hill last week.
When the gunman shot into our classroom, Nicholas Dorett was in front of me. As Nicholas fell, I matched his every movement and hid underneath his lifeless body.
Last year, there was a memorial here with crosses and stars of David representing the lives lost. But now the community has made a garden. Students and parents of victims say they're getting strength from the community, but also through activism. But national legislative change has been modest. Congress hasn't passed any new federal gun control laws, but has passed legislation allowing states and federal agencies to better share mental health and criminal records. States, including Florida, have passed 66 gun control bills. At least 7 states expanded background checks. A Florida commission investigating the shooting made dozens of recommendations last month, including metal detectors and so-called hard corners where students can hide. The district says it's adopted more than half of the recommendations so far. Adriana Diaz, CBS News, Parkland, Florida.
And here now to take a look at the public's opinion on gun policy 1 year after Parkland is Anthony Salvanto. He is the CBS News Elections and Surveys Director. Anthony, thank you so much for being here. Always a pleasure to talk with you. So you've put together some polling data 1 year after the shooting. Where do Americans now stand on gun control?
One of the things they told us is that they're frustrated, and this is actually covering people on all sides, people who think laws should be more strict, kept the same, less strict. That frustration cuts across all of that, and some, particularly for those who feel that they should be more strict, we even see some saying that they're still angry.
Right.
And part of that comes off of what we just saw, in the report, where you have seen legislation a lot in the states, but there still is, people tell us, a feeling out there that more could happen, particularly on a lot of things that people seem to agree on. And there's actually more of that than you might think.
That's interesting because it does break down somewhat on partisan sides, doesn't it, when it comes to gun control? Are there any areas that aren't partisan?
Well, in the abstract, it often does. So when you ask things like more strict versus less strict or kept the same, that's true. But you do see broad areas of policy agreement, especially when you ask about things that sort of cover this topic holistically. So you do get broad support for things like assault weapons bans or limitations. You do get broader support for background checks. You also get better broad support for mental health screenings.
So why then do these things not get traction? Because these have been in the news for a while. I mean, these are clearly issues that you say both sides of the aisle can agree on. Why has there not been legislation going forward? Is it because there's traction and then time, evaporates after a shooting and people forget about it and other issues come to the fore?
Well, one of the things that we noted a year ago when we did a deep dive into all of this in the polling, and we've tracked, is the suspicion from both sides on the motives of the other side, by which I mean, folks who are gun rights proponents often talk about how much responsibility they feel as responsible gun owners. And that's something that hasn't come across to everyone who is a gun control proponent. And likewise, gun control proponents often tell us that they don't mean to try to take away all guns or create wider gun bans, and yet people who are gun rights proponents often think that that side does.
That it's just the beginning, that it's a slippery slope.
Exactly. So that suspicion sort of haunts both sides, haunts the debate, and also there's sort of, this is classic in gun policy polling, is the intensity of it, which is to say that oftentimes we find people who say that they are gun supporters say that they will not vote for a candidate if they feel that candidate is in any way going to put limits.
But, you know, this is very interesting because something that stood out to me from your polling is that the amount of people last year who said that they favored stricter gun laws was huge, right? Was over 50%.
56%.
Right,
yeah.
56%. But then when asked to list the issues which are the most important to them, it doesn't rank in what, the top 5?
Well, there again, it's this difference in intensity, and that's one of the things in this area or in all of polling that it's always important to look at. There can be things that you care about, but it's often how much you care about them and what you're willing to do.
Right.
So for a long time, those folks who have said gun control laws should be kept where they are will rule out a candidate or rule out a party that they feel goes against that, whereas we've seen less of that on the side that would be for gun control.
Anthony Salvanto, thank you so much for joining us.